In the shadowed halls of their manor, where every smile hides a secret and every whisper conceals a lie, one woman sees through it all. Who's stealing priceless jewels? Who's poisoning guests in the dead of night? And who's pulling the strings behind a deadly game of deception? Miss Jane Marple, an unassuming spinster with a razor-sharp mind, steps into a web of betrayal where one wrong move could be her last. Can she unravel the truth before the manor's secrets claim another victim? Chapter 1. The Whispered Invitation. In the drowsy hamlet of St. Mary Mead, where the morning mist curled around ivy-clad cottages and the air carried the faint sweetness of late-blooming roses, Miss Jane Marple sat by her parlor window, her knitting needles dancing with the quiet precision of a well-rehearsed waltz. It was an October morning in 1932, crisp and golden, with sunlight filtering through lace curtains to dapple the polished oak floor. At 74, Miss Marple was a figure of deceptive fragility, slight, with silver hair tucked beneath a delicate cap, her blue eyes sharp as cut glass behind modest spectacles. Her life was a tapestry of observation, woven from the subtle threads of village gossip and the unspoken truths that lingered in furtive glances. Today that tapestry was about to gain a new pattern. The postman, Mr. Phipps, arrived with his usual cheer, his bicycle bell jingling as he handed her a single envelope. "Something special for you, Miss Marple," he said, tipping his cap. "Not your usual bill or letter from that nephew of yours." "Thank you, Mr. Phipps. And how's your garden faring after that storm?" she asked, her voice warm but probing. "Lost a few dahlias, but the marigolds held strong, thanks to your tip on staking," he replied, before pedaling off. The envelope was a curiosity, heavy vellum sealed with emerald wax bearing a crest, a hawk clutching a quill. Miss Marple's fingers, nimble from years of needlework, broke the seal to reveal elegant looping script. "Dear Miss Marple, your reputation as an astute observer of the human condition has reached my ears. I, Lady Margaret Vere, invite you to Vere Manor for a weekend of stimulating discourse and refined company, beginning October 15th. We shall explore matters of literature, history, and perhaps a hint of intrigue. A car will collect you at noon. Yours with anticipation, Lady Margaret Vere." Miss Marple set the letter on her tea-table, her mind alight. Vere Manor, nestled in the chalk hills of Dorset, was a name whispered in the tea-rooms of St. Mary Mead, a grand estate, its mistress a widow known for her intellectual salons and a rumored penchant for collecting secrets as avidly as rare manuscripts. Why invite an elderly spinster from a quiet village? Her lips twitched in a knowing smile. Such summonses often cloaked hidden motives like a riddle wrapped in silk. She packed a small valise, a woolen dress for evening, a shawl against the autumn chill, and her knitting, a constant companion that doubled as a prop for unobtrusive eavesdropping. At noon, a sleek Daimler purred up to her gate. The driver, a wiry man named Collins, with a face like weathered leather, opened the door with a curt nod. "Miss Marple, Lady Vere's orders. We'll be at the manor by tea." The journey unfolded through a patchwork of hedgerows and rolling fields, the sky a canvas of scudding clouds. Miss Marple watched the landscape shift. Her thoughts drifted to past enigmas, the vanished will in Chipping Cleghorn, the whispered affair at the vicarage. Each had begun with a spark, a letter, a glance, and spiraled into revelations of betrayal. Collins was taciturn, but she coaxed a tidbit from him. "Is the manor lively this season?" He, "Full house, miss. Scholars, artists, a politician or two. Lady Vere likes a mix. Keeps things, interesting." His pause suggested undercurrents.
Miss Marple noted the way his jaw tightened, as if guarding a thought. Vere Manor rose from the horizon like a Gothic dream, its limestone towers piercing the sky, windows glinting like watchful eyes. A peacock strutted past, its tail feathers a burst of iridescent blues. Collins halted before the entrance, where a butler, Mr. Langley, awaited, a gaunt man with a voice like polished brass. "Welcome, Miss Marple," he said, ushering her into a hall of soaring arches and tapestries depicting pastoral scenes. "Her ladyship is in the library." The library was a cathedral of knowledge. Shelves soared to a frescoed ceiling, leather-bound tomes exuding the scent of old paper. A fire crackled in a marble hearth, casting warmth over a dozen guests sipping tea from porcelain cups. Lady Margaret Vere glided forward, her gown of burgundy velvet whispering against the parquet. She was in her 50s, with auburn hair streaked with silver, her blue eyes alight with calculated warmth. "Miss Marple, what a pleasure! Your insight will enliven our gathering." "Your most gracious Lady Vere," Miss Marple replied, her tone demure, but her gaze sweeping the room. Introductions followed. Lord Simon Ashby, Lady Vere's nephew, was a lean man of 30, with hawkish features and a smile that flickered like a faulty lamp. "Back from diplomatic circles in Vienna?" he said, bowing. "Heard you're a marvel at spotting fibs, Miss Marple. We'll have to be on our guard." Next was Dr. Evelyn Carver, a chemist with a penchant for rare minerals, her spectacles reflecting the firelight. "I study crystals, fascinating structures, like nature's secrets in stone," she said, her voice clipped but eager.
Miss Olivia Trent, a novelist with a cascade of blonde curls and a laugh like chiming bells, clasped Miss Marple's hand. "Oh, you're the talk of literary London. They say you see through people like glass." Colonel Rupert Halsey, a retired cavalry officer, stood ramrod straight, his mustache bristling. "Served in the Punjab. Tough country, tougher men. Simon's tales of Vienna intrigue sound tame by comparison." Rounding out the group were Professor Amos Reed, a historian clutching a battered journal, Miss Daphne Lyle, a sharp-tongued journalist with a notebook ever at hand, and the Dowager Lady Constance, whose diamond brooch gleamed as she recounted tales of her youth at court. Tea was served, Darjeeling with lemon, paired with scones and clotted cream. Conversation sparkled. Professor Reed debated the authenticity of a lost Chaucer manuscript, while Olivia spun a yarn about a haunted bookshop in York. Miss Marple listened, her needles clicking, her eyes darting from face to face. The first ripple of deceit came from Lord Simon. "Vienna was a whirl," he boasted, leaning back in his chair. "Negotiated a trade deal with the Austrians, single-handedly saved a British firm from ruin. Dinner with the Chancellor himself, March last." Miss Marple's brow creased faintly. Her nephew Raymond, a journalist, had written of Vienna's political unrest in March. Chancellors were hardly dining with junior diplomats then. Simon's cufflinks, too, were monogrammed with an unfamiliar crest, not the Ashby arms she'd glimpsed in a Debrett's at the vicarage. Before she could probe, a shriek echoed from the hall. A maid, Clara, burst in, her cap askew. "My lady, the sapphire cameo from the guest suite! It's gone! I swear I saw it when I turned down the beds." Lady Vere's composure faltered, her hand clutching a locket at her throat. "My mother's cameo? Priceless! Langley, summon the staff." The room buzzed. Colonel Halsey thumped his cane. "Thievery in a house like this? Preposterous!" Olivia gasped theatrically. "It's like my novel, The Midnight Thief, but real." Miss Marple set her knitting aside. "Might we hear from everyone first? Accusations can cloud the truth."
Lady Vere nodded, and the staff assembled. Langley, the butler, Mrs. Finch, the cook, 2 footmen, Ned and James, and maids Clara and Rose. Each denied involvement, but Miss Marple noted Ned's fidgeting hands and Rose's averted gaze. Simon seized the moment. "What about that new footman, James? Hired from Bristol, wasn't he? Bit of a rough sort." James flushed. "I was in the wine cellar, sir, cataloguing bottles. Mr. Langley can confirm." Langley nodded. "He was there until 3. Miss Marple turned to Simon. "And you, Lord Ashby, where were you this afternoon?" He smirked. "Strolling the rose garden, admiring the blooms. Alone, naturally. Diplomats need solitude." "Indeed," she said softly. "The rose garden is lovely, but the gardeners were pruning today, weren't they? I saw them from the car. Quite a commotion. Hard to stroll unnoticed." Simon's smirk wavered. "Well, perhaps I was in the billiard room." "Curious. The billiard room's cue rack is being polished. Closed all day, Mr. Langley mentioned. And your Vienna tale. March was a turbulent time there. Not ideal for trade dinners." The guests leaned forward. Simon's face reddened. "What are you implying?" "Only that your story shifts like sand," she said kindly. "The cameo is valuable, perhaps a temptation for one in need." Under her steady gaze, Simon crumpled. "All right, I took it. Debts from a bad deal in London. I thought I'd sell it discreetly. Aunt Margaret, I'm sorry." Lady Vere's eyes flashed. "Simon, after all I've done, return it at once." He produced the cameo from his waistcoat, its sapphire gleaming. Lady Vere clutched it, her voice icy. "You'll face consequences, but for now we'll keep this within the family." The colonel snorted. "Soft justice, but it'll do." Dr. Carver raised her teacup. "To Miss Marple, sharper than my finest scalpel." As the staff dispersed, the guests moved to the dining hall for supper. Venison in red wine sauce, roasted parsnips, and a Chateau Lafite that glowed like rubies. Talk turned to lighter matters, Professor Reed's dig in Crete, Olivia's next novel about a cursed tiara. Yet Miss Marple sensed undercurrents. Dr. Carver's lingering glance at Simon, Daphne's pencil scribbling furiously, and Lady Constance's whispered remark about family secrets. As the evening closed, Lady Vere toasted, "To Miss Marple for restoring our peace. May the weekend unfold smoothly." Glasses clinked, but Miss Marple's intuition hummed. The cameo's recovery was a neat resolution, yet whispers of deeper deceit lingered. In her room, a haven of damask curtains and a canopied bed, she heard soft footsteps in the corridor, a hushed voice. "She's too sharp. We must be careful." The manners settled into silence, the day's trauma resolved. Miss Marple closed her eyes, satisfied, yet alert, knowing that in a house of secrets, one unraveled thread often led to a tangled web.
Chapter 2. Shadows in the Drawing Room. The evening at Vere Manor settled over the Dorset hills like a velvet curtain, the sky bruised with twilight as the guests gathered in the drawing room after the cameo's recovery. Miss Jane Marple, her knitting tucked into a tapestry bag, sat near a rosewood table, her slight frame almost lost in the plush armchair. The room glowed with the warmth of a chandelier, its prisms scattering light across gilt-framed portraits and damask walls. The air held a faint tang of cigar smoke, and the sweetness of sherry poured from crystal decanters. The resolution of Lord Simon Ashby's theft had restored a veneer of civility, but Miss Marple's keen eyes, sharp as the needles she'd left behind, caught the undercurrents of unease rippling through the assembled company. Lady Margaret Vere, resplendent in emerald silk, clapped her hands to silence the murmurs.
My friends, let us banish yesterday's discord with an evening of amusement. I propose a game, a parlor mystery, where each of you plays a part in a tale of deception. Miss Marple, I trust you'll keep us honest." The guests chuckled, though their laughter held edges of caution. Miss Marple inclined her head, her smile demure. "I shall do my best, Lady Vere, though human nature is a puzzle that rarely plays fair." The game was an elaborate charade crafted by Lady Vere to mimic a Victorian whodunit. Each guest drew a role from a silver bowl: detective, victim, villain, or witness. The plot revolved around a fictional stolen artifact, a ruby diadem, and the players were to weave lies and truths to obscure or reveal the culprit. Props were provided: a velvet pouch, a brass key, and a cryptic note penned in scarlet ink. The room buzzed with anticipation as the guests scattered to strategize, their whispers like moths fluttering against the lamplight. Miss Marple, assigned the role of detective, observed from her corner. Lord Simon, still smarting from his exposure, played the villain with exaggerated flair, twirling his mustache and dropping hints of a fabricated alibi. He declared, "I was in the conservatory, cataloging orchids," though his eyes darted to Dr. Evelyn Carver, who played a witness. Her response was clipped. "Orchids? I saw you near the library, lurking by the safe." Miss Olivia Trent, the novelist, embraced her role as victim, draping herself dramatically across a chaise lounge. "Oh, the diadem, my family's honor, stolen from my very boudoir." Her giggles undercut the performance, but her gaze lingered on Colonel Rupert Halsey, the designated magistrate, whose stern demeanor faltered when she batted her lashes. Professor Amos Reed, clutching his role as a scholar witness, muttered about ancient curses tied to the diadem, his fingers tracing invisible runes in the air. Miss Daphne Lyle, the journalist, scribbled notes as a bystander, her sharp questions cutting through the theatrics. "Lord Simon, if you were in the conservatory, why is there ink on your cuff? The safe's lock is freshly scratched." The Dowager Lady Constance, playing a dowager much like herself, fanned herself with a lace handkerchief. "Such vulgar accusations! In my day, gentlemen didn't skulk about safes." As the game unfolded, Miss Marple noted the interplay of fact and fiction. The players' lies, though part of the charade, revealed truths about their natures. Simon's quick deflections, Evelyn's guarded glances, Olivia's calculated charm, each was a thread in a larger tapestry. But the game halted abruptly when a real mystery intruded. A sharp gasp came from Miss Daphne Lyle, standing near a mahogany curio cabinet. "The necklace! It's gone!" She pointed to an empty velvet cushion where a string of opals, a centerpiece of Lady Vere's collection, had gleamed moments earlier. The room froze, the fictional diadem forgotten. Lady Vere's face drained of color. "My opal necklace? A gift from my late husband, worth a fortune. It was here when we began the game." Colonel Halsey strode forward, his voice booming. "This is no coincidence. Someone used the game's chaos to steal it. We must search everyone." Olivia clutched her throat theatrically. "Search me? How scandalous!" Dr. Carver adjusted her spectacles, her tone dry. "Let's not be hasty. Opals are brittle. Perhaps it was moved for safekeeping." Miss Marple rose, her voice soft but commanding. "Before we accuse, might we establish a timeline? When was the necklace last seen, and who was near the cabinet?" Lady Vere, regaining composure, confirmed she'd shown the necklace to Olivia just before the game as inspiration for her victim role. The cabinet stood near the fireplace, accessible to all, but partially obscured by a folding screen painted with peonies. Miss Marple's eyes scanned the room, noting the screen's angle and the guests' movements during the charade. She said, "Let's hear from each of you. Where were you when the game began?" Simon spoke first, his tone defensive. "I was by the window, practicing my lines. I didn't go near the cabinet."
Dr. Carver nodded. "I was at the table discussing crystal formations with Professor Reed. We were debating quartz versus opal properties. Hardly thieving business." Professor Reed stammered, I was sketching the diadem's supposed design in my journal, over there, by the bookshelf." Olivia fluttered her hands. "I was on the chaise, perfecting my swoon. The cabinet was miles away." Colonel Halsey grunted. "I was judging the performances from the center of the room. Clear view of everyone. Didn't see a soul near that cabinet." Miss Daphne, her eyes gleaming, said, "I was circulating, taking notes. I passed the cabinet, but didn't touch it." Lady Constance sniffed. "I sat by the hearth, observing this childish game. My eyes never left the players." Miss Marple's gaze lingered on the staff, hovering discreetly at the edges. Clara, the maid from the cameo incident, was polishing a silver tray. Ned and James, the footman, stood by the door, while Mrs. Finch, the cook, had just delivered a tray of macarons. Mr. Langley, the butler, oversaw it all with hawk-like vigilance. "Mr. Langley," Miss Marple said, "did anyone approach the cabinet during the game's setup?" Langley's brow furrowed. "Not that I saw, miss. I was arranging the sherry glasses, but my back was to the cabinet for a moment." Miss Marple turned to Clara. "And you, Clara? You were near the fireplace, weren't you?" Clara blushed. "Yes, miss, but I was dusting, not looking at jewels. I swear it." Ned shifted uncomfortably, and Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. "Ned, you were by the screen, adjusting it for Lady Vere. Did you notice anything?" He swallowed. "No, miss. I just moved the screen as asked. Didn't see no necklace." Miss Marple paced slowly, her steps muffled by the thick carpet. "The screen is key, I think. It obscures the cabinet from most angles, creating a blind spot. Someone familiar with the room's layout could use it to their advantage." Lady Vere frowned. "But who? We were all engrossed in this silly game." Miss Marple's gaze settled on Dr. Carver, whose fingers toyed with a fountain pen. "Dr. Carver, you mentioned opal's brittleness. An odd remark, unless you'd examined the necklace closely. Did you, perhaps, handle it during the game?" Evelyn's eyes widened. "Me? I only saw it when Lady Vere showed it to Olivia. I'm a scientist, not a thief." "Yet your pen," Miss Marple pointed, "has a smudge of opal dust, iridescent like the necklace. Hard to miss." The room gasped. Evelyn's hand froze, the pen glinting under the chandelier. "That's absurd. I must have brushed against something." Miss Marple stepped closer. "And your role as witness required you to move about, didn't it? You passed the cabinet several times by your own account. The screen provided cover, and the game's chaos was the perfect distraction." Simon leapt in, eager to deflect scrutiny. "She's right. Evelyn was skulking about. Saw her near the cabinet myself." Evelyn's composure cracked. "You're one to talk, Simon, after your stunt yesterday." Colonel Halsey banged his cane. "Enough. Miss Marple, what's your conclusion?" She smiled faintly. "The necklace is still in this room. Dr. Carver,
Your satchel. Might we see inside?" Evelyn clutched her leather bag, her face paling. "This is outrageous!" But Lady Vere's voice was steel. "Open it, Evelyn." Reluctantly, Evelyn unlatched the satchel. Nestled among papers and a magnifying glass was the opal necklace, its milky stones shimmering. The guests murmured in shock. "I can explain," Evelyn stammered. "I was studying it, for research. Opals have unique properties. I meant to return it." Miss Marple's tone was gentle but firm. "Research doesn't require concealment, Dr. Carver. Nor does it explain the hidden pocket sewn into your satchel's lining, perfect for small valuables." Evelyn slumped, defeated. "It was a moment of weakness. My fundings dried up. I thought I could sell it abroad." Lady Vere's eyes blazed. "You betrayed my hospitality. Langley, escort Dr. Carver to her room until we decide her fate." As Langley led Evelyn away, the guests exhaled, tension easing, like a taut string released. Olivia clapped her hands. "Miss Marple, you're a marvel, like Sherlock in a shawl." Professor Reed nodded. "Astounding! You saw through the game's fog to the truth." The evening resumed with forced gaiety. Lady Vere called for music. A gramophone spun a waltz, and the guests paired off to a dance. Simon partnered with Olivia, their steps lively, but their glances wary. Colonel Halsey regaled Lady Constance with tales of Lahore, while Daphne scribbled, her eyes darting to Miss Marple. Supper followed. In the dining hall, salmon en croûte, glazed carrots, and a claret that warmed the tongue. Conversations turned to safer topics. Daphne's exposé on art forgeries, Reed's theories on Viking hordes. Yet Miss Marple sensed a lingering shadow. Evelyn's theft was bold, but her motive felt too simple, too isolated. Why risk so much in a room full of witnesses? And Simon's quick accusation, had he known more than he let on? As the meal ended with a lemon soufflé, Lady Vere raised her glass. "To Miss Marple, our guardian of truth. May our weekend find peace." The toast was heartfelt, but Miss Marple's intuition prickled. In the corridor, as she retired to her room, a haven of chintz and moonlight, she overheard a whispered exchange. "She's too clever. We'll need a better plan." The voice was unfamiliar, swallowed by a creak of a floorboard. The manor's peace was a fragile veneer, and Miss Marple knew the night held secrets, yet to be unveiled.
Chapter 3. The Midnight Confession. The night at Vere Manor draped itself in stillness, the Dorset hills cloaked in darkness beyond the mullioned windows. After the opal necklace's recovery, the guests had retired with murmured good nights, their steps echoing in the cavernous halls. Miss Jane Marple, her knitting stowed in her room's armoire, sat by a flickering oil lamp, her mind as alert as her 74 years belied. The manor's opulence, its tapestries of hunting scenes, its polished oak banisters, felt like a stage set for secrets, and the evening's resolution had only deepened her suspicion that darker currents swirled beneath the surface. Her room, a haven of brocade curtains and a four-poster bed, overlooked the moonlit gardens where shadows danced among sculpted hedges. She had just settled with a cup of chamomile tea when a scream shattered the silence, a high, piercing wail that seemed to claw at the walls. Miss Marple set her cup down, her heart steady, but her senses sharpened. Slipping into her shawl, she stepped into the corridor where gaslights cast long, wavering shadows. The scream had come from the east wing where the guest suites were housed. As she hurried toward the sound, doors creaked open, and bleary-eyed figures emerged. Lord Simon Ashby, his dressing gown hastily tied, Miss Olivia Trent, her curls tumbling loose, and Colonel Rupert Halsey, clutching a candlestick like a weapon. Lady Margaret Vere appeared last, her face pale beneath her nightcap, her voice trembling. "What in heaven's name?" "It came from Daphne's room," Simon said, pointing to a door ajar at the corridor's end. Miss Marple reached the room first, her steps brisk but measured. Inside, Miss Daphne Lyle, the journalist, lay crumpled on the floor beside her writing desk, her notebook splayed open. A glass of water had spilled, pooling around a vial of clear liquid. Her face was ashen, her breathing shallow, and a faint scent of almonds hung in the air. Olivia gasped, clutching Simon's arm. "Is she—" "Not dead," Miss Marple said, kneeling to check Daphne's pulse. "But poisoned, I fear. Colonel, fetch Dr. Carver at once. She's a chemist, not just a thief." Halsey nodded, his military instincts kicking in, and dashed off. Lady Margaret wrung her hands. "Poison? In my house? This is unthinkable." Simon's eyes darted to the vial. "That smells like cyanide, vile stuff. Who'd do this?" Miss Marple's gaze swept the room. A half-written article on the desk, a window slightly ajar, letting in a chill breeze, and a single rose petal on the floor, its crimson stark against the rug. "We must act quickly," she said. "Lady Vere, summon the staff. No one leaves the manor." Dr. Evelyn Carver arrived, her earlier disgrace momentarily forgotten. She examined Daphne with clinical precision. "Cyanide, yes, small dose thankfully. She's unconscious but stable. I can administer a remedy. Sodium thiosulfate, if the manor's medical kit has it." The butler, Mr. Langley, confirmed the kit's contents, and Evelyn set to work, her hand steady despite the tension. As Daphne's color slowly returned, the guests gathered in the room, their faces a mix of shock and suspicion. Professor Amos Reed clutched his journal, muttering, "This is no accident. Cyanide doesn't just appear." The Dowager Lady Constance, her diamond brooch glinting in the candlelight, sniffed, "Journalists poke their noses where they don't belong. Perhaps she provoked someone." Miss Marple ignored the speculation, her eyes on the rose petal. "Curious," she murmured. "The gardens have no red roses, only white and yellow. Where did this come from?" Olivia, regaining her composure, ventured, "Maybe it's from a bouquet? I saw one in the morning room yesterday." Miss Marple shook her head. "Those were lilies. This petal is fresh, not dried." She turned to the staff, now assembled: Langley, Mrs. Finch, Ned, James, Clara, and Rose. "Did anyone bring flowers into the guest wing today?" Heads shook in unison, but Rose, the younger maid, bit her lip, her eyes darting to Ned. Miss Marple noted it but pressed on. "Let's reconstruct the evening. Daphne was last seen at supper, correct? Where did everyone go afterward?" Lady Vere spoke first. "I retired to my study to review correspondence, alone." Simon shrugged. "I was in the billiard room, practicing shots. No one else there." Olivia fluttered her hands. "I was in my room, drafting a scene for my novel. It's about a poisoning, actually. How eerie." Halsey grunted. "Library, reading military histories. Quiet night." Professor Reed stammered. "I was in my room, transcribing notes on a Saxon burial mound. Didn't see Daphne after supper." Lady Constance pursed her lips. "Journalists poke their noses where they don't belong. Perhaps she provoked someone." Miss Marple ignored the speculation, her eyes on Rose's trembling hands. "Rose, did you see Miss Lyle this evening?" "No, miss," Rose whispered, but her voice cracked. Daphne stirred,
her eyes fluttering open. "The rose," she rasped. "It was in my water." The room tensed. Miss Marple kneeled beside her. "The petal was in your glass. Did you see who brought it?" Daphne's voice was faint. "Didn't see. Someone knocked, left a tray. Thought it was tea." Miss Marple examined the tray on the bedside table. A single glass, now empty, and a saucer with no cup. "No tea," she murmured. "Someone delivered this deliberately." She stood up, addressing the group. "Cyanide requires intent. Someone knew Daphne's habits, her late-night writing, her open window. The petal is a clue, not an accident." Simon's face darkened. "You're saying one of us is a poisoner? That's madness."
Halsey growled. "Or a servant with a grudge. Journalists stir up trouble. Maybe she uncovered something." Miss Marple's gaze returned to Rose. "Rose, you were in the laundry, you say. Yet your apron has a thorn scratch, fresh, like from a rose stem. The manor has no red roses, but the village florist does. Did you visit there today?" Rose's eyes widened, tears spilling. I didn't mean harm. It was Mr. Simon. He gave me the rose, said to put it in Miss Lyle's room as a prank. I didn't know about no poison." Simon recoiled. "Me? That's a lie. I'd never—" Miss Marple raised a hand. "Rose, tell us exactly what happened." Sobbing, Rose confessed. "He gave me a shilling and a red rose this afternoon, said to leave it on her tray as a jest, said she'd laugh. I put it in her water glass, like he asked, and left the tray outside her door." The guests turned to Simon, whose bravado crumbled. "I gave her a rose, yes, for a lock. I bought it in the village this morning, but cyanide? I'd never." Miss Marple's voice was gentle but relentless. "The rose was a distraction, Lord Ashby. Cyanide is odorless in small doses, easily masked by the water. You knew Daphne was writing an article, perhaps about your Vienna dealings. She mentioned a scandal in the dining hall, and you were quick to accuse others tonight." Simon's jaw tightened. "You've no proof." Miss Marple pointed to his cuff. "Your sleeve has a faint stain, almond-scented like the vial. You handled it, didn't you?" Under her unyielding gaze, Simon slumped. "It wasn't meant to kill, just to scare her. Keep her quiet. She was digging into my finances, threatening to publish lies about forged bonds. I got the cyanide from a chemist friend, thought a small dose would make her ill, nothing more." Lady Vere's face was thunderous. "Simon, you've shamed us twice. Langley, confine him until the police arrive." As Langley escorted Simon away, Daphne, now sitting up with Evelyn's aid, whispered, "Thank you, Miss Marple. I thought I was done for." Olivia, her novelist's flair undimmed, clasped her hands. "It's like my book. But you, Miss Marple, you're the real heroine." Halsey nodded gruffly. "Damned fine work. Saved the girl's life." The guests dispersed, the manor settling into an uneasy quiet. Lady Vere offered brandy in the drawing-room, but the mood was somber. Conversations turned to safer topics, Reed's theories on ancient poisons, Constance's memories of court intrigues. Yet Miss Marple, sipping her brandy, felt the weight of unresolved questions. Simon's motive was personal, but his access to cyanide suggested connections beyond the manor. And Rose's role? Had she been entirely innocent, or was fear masking a deeper complicity? As the clock struck 1, Miss Marple returned to her room. The moonlight cast eerie patterns on the walls, and a faint creak came from the corridor. A door, perhaps, or a footstep. The poisoner was caught, the night's crisis averted, but whispers of a greater malice lingered, like the scent of almonds in the air.
She closed her eyes, satisfied with the confession, but certain that Vere Manor's secrets were far from fully unveiled.
Chapter 4. Echoes of Betrayal. The dawn at Vere Manor broke with a fragile comb, the Dorset hills bathed in a soft mist that clung to the estate's ancient stones. The previous night's drama, Lord Simon Ashby's attempt to poison Miss Daphne Lyle, had left the guests subdued, their trust in one another frayed like an old tapestry. Miss Jean Marple, seated at her window with a cup of Earl Grey, watched the sunrise paint the gardens in hues of amber and rose. At 74, her slight frame and silver hair belied a mind as sharp as a newly honed blade, her blue eyes catching every nuance of the Manor's uneasy atmosphere. The cameo theft, the opal necklace, and now a poisoning, each incident had peeled back a layer of civility, revealing secrets that simmered beneath Vere Manor's polished surface. Breakfast was a quiet affair in the dining hall, the long mahogany table laden with kedgeree, poached eggs, and racks of golden toast. Lady Margaret Vere, her auburn hair pinned tightly, presided with forced composure, though her fingers betrayed a tremor as she poured coffee. The remaining guests, Miss Olivia Trent, Colonel Rupert Halsey, Professor Amos Reed, and the Dowager Lady Constance, ate sparingly, their conversation stilted. Dr. Evelyn Carver, confined to her room pending further inquiry, was absent, and Simon was under lock and key, awaiting the local constable. Daphne, recovered but pale, sat at the table's end, her notebook closed for once. Miss Marple, nibbling a scone, noted the glances exchanged, Olivia's fleeting look of pity toward Daphne, Halsey's stern frown at the empty chairs, Reed's nervous fidgeting with his napkin. Lady Vere broke the silence. "We must not let last night's events overshadow our weekend. I propose a morning in the archives. Our library holds documents from the Vere family's past, fascinating for scholars like Professor Reed." Reed brightened, his eyes gleaming behind thick spectacles. "A splendid idea! I've heard of a 17th-century Vere ledger, rumors of a disputed inheritance. May I examine it?" Lady Vere nodded. "Of course. Miss Marple, will you join us? Your insight might uncover hidden stories?" Miss Marple smiled demurely. "I'd be delighted. Old papers often speak louder than words." The library was a cavern of knowledge, its air heavy with the scent of aged vellum and leather. Oak shelves stretched to a vaulted ceiling, where a stained-glass window cast kaleidoscopic light across the room. A long table held stacks of manuscripts, some bound in cracked leather, others loose sheaves yellowed by time. The guests gathered, their curiosity piqued, while Mr. Langley, the butler, brought a locked chest said to contain the Vere family's most sensitive records. As Reed unlocked the chest with a key from Lady Vere, he lifted out a ledger bound in green morocco, its pages brittle but intact. "This is it," he breathed. "The 1663 accounts. Rumors say it details a feud between two Vere brothers over the estate." The group pored over the documents, their voices hushed. Olivia traced a faded signature. "Look, Edward Vere, disinherited for marrying a merchant's daughter. How romantic!" Halsey grunted. "Romantic? Foolish! Bloodlines matter in families like this." Daphne, her journalist's instinct rekindled, scribbled notes. A feud could explain the Manor's so-called curse, bad blood passed down. Miss Marple, leafing through a bundle of letters, paused at a parchment with a broken seal. "This is curious. A codicil to Edward's will, dated 1664, granting his share to a cousin, Thomas Vere. But the handwriting, see these loops, they don't match the legends." Reed peered over her shoulder. "Forgery? That would have shifted the estate's ownership." Lady Constance sniffed. "Scandalous, but not uncommon. Families squabble over land like dogs over bones." As they debated, a shadow moved near the library's alcove, a rustle of fabric behind a bookcase. Miss Marple's eyes flicked up, catching a glimpse of a figure retreating. "Who's there?" she called. The group turned, startled, as Clara, the maid, emerged, her face flushed. "Just dusting, miss. Didn't mean to startle." Miss Marple's gaze was gentle but piercing. "Dusting behind bookshelves at this hour?" Clara stammered. I thought I saw a spider." The explanation hung thin, but before Miss Marple could press, Lady Vere gasped, holding up a modern document from the chest. "It's a draft of my late husband's will, altered to favor a distant relative, Mr. Julian Marsh. I never approved this." Halsey's mustache bristled. "Altered? That's fraud. Who's this Marsh fellow?" Lady Vere's eyes narrowed. "A cousin, estranged. He's been in London claiming rights to the estate. I thought it settled." Miss Marple examined the letter, noting the typewriter's uneven keys and distinctive E slanted left. "This was typed on the machine in your study, Lady Vere. I saw it yesterday." "Someone with access wrote this." The group exchanged wary glances. Olivia whispered, "A forger among us. How thrilling!" Daphne's pencil flew. "This could be my next story. The curse of Vere Manor strikes again." Reed, his voice shaky, said, "If Marsh is involved, he might be here under an alias." Miss Marple's mind raced, recalling the guests' alibis from the previous incidents. "Let's consider who had access to the study. Lady Vere, who uses that typewriter?" "Only myself and Mr. Langley for correspondence, but the study is unlocked during the day."
Halsey pounded the table. "We must confront this Marsh. Is he among us?" Lady Vere shook her head. "He's not a guest, but he visited last month, demanding to see the archives. I refused." Miss Marple's eyes returned to Clara, who lingered near the door, her hands twisting her apron. "Clara, you were in the study yesterday, fetching stationery. Did you see anyone at the typewriter?" Clara's eyes darted to the floor. "No, miss. I was in and out quick." Miss Marple noted the maid's unease, but shifted focus. "Let's examine the chest's lock. If it's been tampered with, we may find our forger." Reed inspected the lock, his fingers trembling. Scratches, recent ones. Someone forced it open. The group turned to the staff, now summoned: Langley, Mrs. Finch, Ned, James, and Rose. Langley's face was impassive. "The chest was secure last I checked, 2 days ago." Mrs. Finch bristled. "None of my kitchen folk would touch it." Ned and James denied involvement, but Rose's gaze flickered to a corner of the room where a small table held a vase of white roses, none red, unlike the petal in Daphne's room. Miss Marple stepped closer. "Rose, you seem uneasy. Did you see anyone near the chest?" Rose's voice quavered. I saw Mr. Reed in the library late last night, miss. He was poking about the shelves." Reed flushed. "I was researching. The ledger fascinated me. I couldn't sleep." Miss Marple's tone was soft but firm. "Yet you didn't mention being here. And your journal, may we see it?" Reed hesitated, then handed over his battered notebook. Among sketches of Saxon artifacts were notes in a hurried scrawl. "Will, Marsh claim valid. Check codicil authenticity." A folded paper slipped out. A carbon copy of the forged will. The room gasped. Halsey growled. "Reed, you blackguard! What's this?" Reed stammered. "I found it in the chest yesterday. I was verifying its authenticity. Purely academic." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. "Yet you kept it hidden. And your pen, the ink matches the corrections on the forgery. Blue, with a slight shimmer." Reed's shoulders slumped. "All right, I met Marsh in London. He paid me to plant the document, to stir confusion. Said it would weaken Lady Vere's claim. I didn't mean harm, just needed funds for my dig." Lady Vere's voice was ice. "You betrayed my trust, Amos. Langley, escort him to his room until the authorities arrive." As Langley led Reed away, Olivia clapped. Miss Marple, you're a wizard, unraveling forgeries like a novel's climax. Daphne, her strength returning, scribbled furiously. This is front-page material. Halsey nodded. Fine work, madam. You've saved the Vere legacy. The group dispersed to the drawing-room for tea, the mood lighter, but still tinged with wariness. Lady Vere served a psalm with trembling hands, her gratitude to Miss Marple fervent. Conversations turned to lighter topics, Olivia's tale of a haunted castle, Constance's memories of a royal ball, yet Miss Marple's intuition hummed. Reed's confession was neat, but Marsh's absence nagged her. Was he truly in London? Or closer, pulling strings? As afternoon faded, a footman delivered a chilling discovery. An anonymous note slipped under Lady Vere's door. In block letters, it read, "The past isn't buried. Beware the next move." Miss Marple folded the note, her mind racing. The forgery was exposed, the manor's peace restored for now, but the note's threat lingered like a storm on the horizon.
She retired to her room, the creak of the manor's floors echoing the whispers of secrets yet to be unearthed.
Chapter 5. The Garden of Deceit. The morning light filtered through the mist at Vere Manor, casting a soft glow over the Dorset estate's sprawling gardens. The air was crisp, scented with damp earth and late-blooming lavender, as the guests gathered on the terrace after the unsettling discovery of the forged will. Miss Jane Marple, her shawl draped over her shoulders, stood by a balustrade, her silver hair catching the sun like a halo. At 74, her delicate frame and gentle demeanor masked a mind that sliced through deception like a blade through silk. The weekend's cascade of incidents, the stolen cameo, the pilfered opal necklace, the poisoning attempt on Daphne Lyle, and the forged will, had left the household on edge, each guest eyeing the others with veiled suspicion. Yet Miss Marple sensed the unraveling was far from complete. Lady Margaret Vere, her auburn hair swept into a severe bun, addressed the group with forced brightness. After yesterday's revelations, let us clear our minds with a diversion. The gardens are renowned. Shall we embark on a scavenger hunt? I've devised riddles to guide us through the maze and parterres with a prize for the victor. The remaining guests, Miss Olivia Trent, Colonel Rupert Halsey, the Dowager Lady Constance, and Daphne Lyle, now recovered but subdued, murmured agreement, though their enthusiasm was tepid. Lord Simon Ashby, Professor Amos Reed, and Dr. Evelyn Carver were confined to their rooms, awaiting the authorities. Miss Marple, her knitting left indoors, nodded. A charming idea, Lady Vere. A hunt may reveal more than flowers. The rules were simple. Each guest received a parchment with a riddle leading to a hidden token, a brass medallion stamped with the Vere crest. The first to collect all 5 medallions would win a rare book from the manor's library. The group dispersed into the gardens, a labyrinth of clipped hedges, rose arbors, and a shimmering lake fringed with willows. Miss Marple, paired with Daphne for the hunt, clutched her riddle. Where shadows dance and waters sing, seek the heart of the verdant spring. As they wandered toward the lake, Daphne's voice was low. Miss Marple, I owe you my life, but this place, it's a nest of vipers. That note yesterday, someone's still plotting. Miss Marple's eyes scanned the horizon, where Olivia's laughter echoed from the maze and Halsey's gruff voice carried from the rose garden. Indeed, Miss Lyle, the note was bold, placed under Lady Vere's door. Our culprit is close. The lake's edge revealed their first medallion, tucked beneath a stone sculpture as a nymph. Daphne pocketed it, her journalist's instincts alert. This feels staged, like someone wants us distracted. Miss Marple nodded, noting a faint footprint in the mud, a man's boot, too large for the footmen Ned or James. Let's keep moving. The next riddle.
In thorny embrace, a secret lies beneath the gaze of watchful eyes. The rose arbor, perhaps? They joined Olivia and Lady Constance at the arbor, where thorny vines framed a marble bench. Olivia, her curls bouncing, held up a medallion. "Found mine! This is deliciously thrilling, like my novel The Hidden Crown." Lady Constance, fanning herself, sniffed. "Childish games, but I suppose it passes the time. My riddle points to the maze." Halsey emerged from the roses, his face flushed. "Got one too, under a statue. But something's off. Saw a groundskeeper lurking, not one of the usual staff." Miss Marple's brow furrowed. A groundskeeper? Lady Vere mentioned no new hires. Their clue led to the maze, its high hedges a green fortress. As they navigated its twists, Miss Marple overheard a hushed exchange near a dead end. Two voices, one sharp, one nervous. She signaled Daphne to stay quiet, creeping closer. Behind a hedge, Mr. Langley, the butler, spoke to a man in rough tweeds, his face obscured by a cap. "You've gone too far," Langley hissed. "This wasn't part of the plan." The stranger muttered, "Just do your part, or we're both done." They vanished as Miss Marple approached, but she noted the stranger's limp, a distinctive hitch. Returning to Daphne, she whispered, "We've stumbled on something. That man isn't staff." The hunt continued, with Halsey and Olivia finding medallions near a sundial and a hidden grotto. But as they gathered at the terrace to compare finds, Lady Vere's face paled. "My ledgers, they're missing. The estate's financial records kept in the study. I checked this morning. They're gone." Halsey's mustache bristled. "Another theft? This manor is a sieve." Olivia gasped. "First jewels, now papers? It's a conspiracy." Daphne's eyes gleamed. "Financial records, that's a motive for blackmail, or worse." Miss Marple's voice was calm but firm. "Let's retrace our steps. The ledgers were in the study last night, Lady Vere." "Yes," she replied, "locked in a safe. Only Langley and I have the key." Miss Marple's gaze drifted to the butler, who stood rigid by the terrace doors. "Mr. Langley, you were in the gardens during the hunt. Did you check the safe today?" Langley's jaw tightened. "No, madam. I was overseeing the staff." She turned to the group. "The hunt took us all outdoors, leaving the manor empty, a perfect opportunity for theft. But the ledgers are bulky, hard to conceal. They're likely still here." Halsey pounded his fist. "We search the grounds. No one leaves until we find them." Miss Marple raised a hand. "First, let's question the staff. Someone may have seen our groundskeeper."
The staff assembled, Mrs. Finch, Ned, James, Clara, and Rose. Mrs. Finch bristled. "My kitchen's no place for thieves. Been kneading dough all morning." Clara and Rose claimed to have been cleaning the guest wing, while Ned and James said they were repairing a gate. But Miss Marple's eyes lingered on Langley, whose polished demeanor seemed strained. "Mr. Langley, you were near the maze. Who was the man you spoke to?" Langley's eyes widened. "Man? I was alone, madam, checking the hedges for storm damage." Miss Marple's tone was gentle but unyielding. "I heard voices and saw a man with a limp. Not a servant. His boots were caked with city mud, not garden soil." The guests murmured. Daphne whispered, "City mud? Like London?" Lady Vere's voice was sharp. "Langley, explain yourself." Under Miss Marple's steady gaze, Langley's composure cracked. "It was Julian Marsh, Lady Vere's cousin. He's been blackmailing me for months, threatening to expose a debt I owe. He demanded I steal the ledgers to prove financial mismanagement, to bolster his claim to the estate." Halsey roared, "Marsh again? Where is he?" Langley swallowed. "Hiding in the old gardener's cottage beyond the lake. He took the ledgers there."
Miss Marple nodded. "Let's retrieve them. Colonel, will you lead?" Halsey, with Ned and James, marched to the cottage, a crumbling stone structure overgrown with ivy. Inside, they found Marsh, a wiry man with a scarred cheek and a pronounced limp, rifling through the ledgers. He froze as Halsey seized him, the ledgers tumbling to the floor. "Caught red-handed," Halsey bellowed. "You'll answer to the law." Marsh sneered. "You can't prove anything. Those ledgers show Vere mismanaged funds. My claim's legitimate." Miss Marple, arriving with the others, examined the ledgers. "These entries are altered. Ink too fresh, handwriting too precise. Mr. Marsh, you forged these, didn't you, using Langley's access to the study?" Marsh's defiance faltered. I had to. The estate's mine by right." Lady Vere's eyes blazed. "You've disgraced our name. Langley, you're dismissed. Marsh, the police will deal with you." As the footman escorted the culprits away, Olivia clapped. "Miss Marple, you're a genius. It's like a play with you as the director." Daphne scribbled furiously. "This is my scoop. The Vere conspiracy unraveled." Lady Constance nodded. "Remarkable, Miss Marple. You've saved the estate." The group returned to the terrace for tea. The ledgers restored to the safe. Conversations turned to lighter fare. Olivia's plans for a new novel, Halsey's tales of Himalayan treks. Yet Miss Marple's intuition stirred. Marsh's scheme was bold, but Langley's betrayal suggested deeper loyalties at play. Who else might he have served? As evening fell, the manor settled into a fragile peace. Miss Marple, retiring to her room, heard a faint rustle outside. A note slipped under her door in the same block letters as before. "You're close, but not there. The truth lies higher." She tucked the note away, her mind alight. The hunt had resolved the theft, but the anonymous threat hinted at a mastermind, still at large, orchestrating from the shadows.
Chapter 6. Revelation at Dawn. The first light of dawn crept over the Dorset hills, painting Vere Manor's ancient stones with a delicate blush. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of dew-soaked grass, as the estate stirred from its uneasy slumber. Miss Jane Marple, seated by her bedroom window, watched the sunrise gild the gardens, her knitting idle for once. At 74, her slight frame and silver hair belied a mind that wove together the weekend's tangled threads. Stolen cameo, pilfered necklace, attempted poisoning, forged will and embezzled ledgers into a pattern only she could see. Each incident had been resolved, yet the anonymous notes, with their cryptic warnings, pointed to a mastermind orchestrating the chaos. Today, Miss Marple knew, would bring the final unraveling. The guests gathered for breakfast in the dining hall, the table set with porcelain and silver, though the mood was somber. Lady Margaret Vere, her auburn hair tightly pinned, presided with a strained smile, her eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. Miss Olivia Trent, her curls subdued, sipped tea quietly. Colonel Rupert Halsey, his mustache bristling, buttered toast with military precision. The Dowager Lady Constance, her diamond brooch catching the light, murmured about returning to London. Miss Daphne Lyle, fully recovered, scribbled notes, her journalist's zeal undimmed. Lord Simon Ashby, Professor Amos Reed, Dr. Evelyn Carver, Mr. Langley, and Julian Marsh were gone, either confined or awaiting the authorities, leaving the group diminished but wary. Miss Marple, nibbling a croissant, observed the subtle tensions. Olivia's fidgeting fingers, Halsey's frequent glances at the door, Constance's pursed lips. Lady Vere broke the silence. "After this trying weekend, let us share a quiet morning. The chapel offers solace, perhaps a brief service?" Halsey nodded. "Good idea. Clears the mind." Olivia brightened. "I could read a poem, something uplifting like Shelley." Miss Marple inclined her head. "A fine suggestion, Lady Vere. A moment of reflection may illuminate more than we expect." The chapel, a stone annex adorned with stained glass saints, was a haven of serenity.
Its pews smelled of polished wood, and a small organ stood silent in the corner. As the group settled, Lady Vere lit a candle at the altar, her movements reverent. Olivia recited Ode to the West Wind, her voice trembling with emotion, while Halsey read a psalm in his gruff baritone. Daphne, seated beside Miss Marple, whispered, "This feels like a pause before the storm." Miss Marple's eyes, sharp behind her spectacles, scanned the chapel. A brass plaque on the wall listed Vere ancestors, their names etched in solemn rows. One caught her attention. Cecilia Vere, 1890 to 1910, beloved daughter. A memory stirred, village gossip about a Vere scandal, a girl disowned for a forbidden love. She filed it away, her intuition humming. As the service ended, a clatter came from the vestry, a small room behind the altar. Halsey strode forward, flinging open the door. Inside, a velvet pouch lay spilled on the floor, revealing a gold locket engraved with a rose. Lady Vere gasped, "My sister Cecilia's locket! It vanished years ago! How is it here?" Olivia's eyes widened. "Another theft uncovered? This manor's a maze of secrets." Daphne's pencil flew. "Cecilia, wasn't she the one who ran off with a poet?" Miss Marple's voice was soft but commanding. "Lady Vere, tell us about Cecilia. Her story may hold the key." Lady Vere's face tightened. "Cecilia was my younger sister, disowned by my father for eloping with a penniless artist. She died in poverty, and the locket, her last gift from mother, was thought lost. I never dreamed it was here." Colonel Halsey frowned. "Someone hid it deliberately. But why now?" Miss Marple examined the locket, noting its worn clasp and a faint scratch on the rose. "This was placed recently. The dust in the vestry is undisturbed except for fresh footprints. Small, like a woman's." The group turned to the remaining women, Olivia, Constance, and Daphne. Olivia laughed nervously. "Me? I've been in the chapel the whole time." Constance sniffed. "I have no interest in old lockets. My jewels are far grander." Daphne shook her head. "I'm here for stories, not thefts." Miss Marple's gaze drifted to Lady Vere, whose hands clutched the altar rail. "Lady Vere, you've been central to every incident this weekend. The cameo, the necklace, the poisoning, the forgery, the ledgers, all tied to your estate. And now this locket, your sister's. Why would it reappear now?" Lady Vere's eyes flashed. "Are you accusing me, Miss Marple? I'm the victim here." Miss Marple's tone was gentle but relentless. "Victims don't always lack motive. Each incident weakened your household, your nephew exposed, your guest poisoned, your butler compromised. Yet you remained untouched, guiding our attention. The notes, the truth lies higher, point to you, the manor's head." Colonel Halsey's jaw dropped. "Margaret? That's preposterous." Olivia gasped. "Like a novel's twist. But why?" Miss Marple stepped closer, her voice steady. "Cecilia's disgrace haunted you, didn't it? The locket's return was no accident. You placed it to stir old wounds, to distract us. Each crime was a move in a chess game designed to eliminate rivals to your fortune. Simon's debts, Daphne's articles, Reed's greed, Marsh's claims, all threats to your control." Lady Vere's composure cracked, her voice rising. "You've no proof. This is slander." Miss Marple pointed to the locket. "The scratch on the rose matches a mark on your ring, the one you wear always. You hid the locket years ago, after Cecilia's death, to erase her shame."
This weekend, you orchestrated chaos to secure your legacy, planting clues to expose others while appearing blameless. Daphne's eyes widened. "The notes! They were in block letters, like the estate's typewriter, but you said only you and Langley used it." Lady Vere's shoulders slumped, her defiance crumbling. I had to protect the manor. Cecilia's scandal nearly ruined us. Simon's debts, Marsh's greed, they'd tear it apart again.
I use their weaknesses, stage the thefts, the poison, the forgery, to discredit them. The locket was my final touch, to remind them of our family's honor." Halsey roared, "You poisoned a girl? Forged documents? You're mad!" Olivia clutched her chest. "It's like my villainous Lady Morgana, but real." Miss Marple's voice was kind but firm. "You miscalculated, Lady Vere. Human nature resists control. Your schemes unraveled because truth, like a weed, finds a way." Lady Vere sank to a pew, tears streaming. "I only wanted to save Vera Manor for Cecilia's memory." Constance, her voice soft for once, said, "You've destroyed it instead." Miss Marple signaled to the footman, James, who'd lingered by the door. "Fetch the constable. Lady Vere will answer for her actions." As the authorities arrived, the guests gathered in the drawing room, their shock giving way to relief. Daphne scribbled her final notes, her article now a sensation. Olivia vowed to write a novel inspired by the weekend. Halsey offered to escort Constance back to London, their camaraderie a bright spot in the gloom. Miss Marple, sipping tea, reflected on the weekend's tumult. Each lie had been a thread, each crime a knot, and her intuition had unraveled them all. As she packed her valise, the manor's shadows seemed to lift, its secrets laid bare. The car to St. Mary Mead awaited, and Miss Marple stepped into the sunlight, her shawl snug against the autumn chill. Very Manor faded behind her, its grandeur intact, but its heart exposed. Back in her cottage, she'd resume her knitting, her garden, her quiet life, knowing that truth, like her needles, always found its mark. The weekend was over, the puzzle solved, and Miss Marple's deadly intuition had triumphed, leaving no thread untied.